Hello, welcome inside a weekly recap edition of the Scores Table. Brian Hench and Danny Riego here with you. We have a lot to get to this morning, including a guest. We'll have Hollie Eaves with us this morning to talk about South Knox, which is coming off a big weekend. Danny and I both took in a lot of girls basketball this week. And we're going to start with what we saw on Saturday we agreed to. That is Homestead's win over Pike. Danny, I'll let you lead us off with just some general thoughts on that game.
Yeah, Homestead's one of the basketball teams that I think people want to put at the pinnacle of the pyramid with best teams. And so I think we'll have an opportunity to follow the progression of the team. At the first point that we saw them, which was Saturday, that's who they are. I mean, they're an incredible basketball team that does a lot of things very well, that has a lot of really good individual pieces. We can lead with Maya Epps. I mean, we can lead with Gabby Helson. We can lead with Whitney Ankenbrook. We could lead with the great 26 class. But I want to talk about Carly Mullering first, is the first kid that I want to talk about, because having streamed the Northridge game, which for those people in the Indianapolis area might not know, Northridge is one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the north half of the state, like kind of on that Michiana border. They're very well coached by Coach Springer, and they have a lot of really good pieces, and they're coming off of a deep run last year, postseason run last year. And Homestead has to go there in their very first basketball game, and I think they win at 62-60, but Carly Mullering was the headline. And as I was watching the game, 4 or 5 days ago, I'm thinking, well, if they're going to get this kind of production from Carly Mullering, and to quantify their production, I mean, Hank, it was probably 3 threes and an 18-footer and everything. I was just thinking, they're going to be really tough to beat if they get spot production like that. The second game that I watched is the Pike game, and Mullering does it again. Like she has a way. She must have had a great summer. She's always been a hard worker. Coach Parker seems to trust her implicitly. But now it's gotten to the point where it just doesn't seem like this is the class of 26 show starring Maya Epps. I mean, this is a balanced basketball team with a ton of really good players. Before I throw it to you, interestingly, I think Parker, and I talked to Coach Hollins before, all due respect to Pike. I mean, that Homestead, that was the second half of that was practice-like. I mean, I know Pike really missed a lot of layups, and we'll talk about that, and missed a lot of free throws, but Homestead was able to focus on just moving the ball down the field and getting better. And one of the things that I saw as a deficiency for Homestead was, I think they had 2 plays, one at the end of the first quarter, one at the end of the second quarter, where they chucked it out of bounds and then turned it over. And I wasn't in the locker room, but that's probably what Coach Parker was talking about. Just something like situational basketball. But as we talk about Homestead and through the season, and we'll talk about them a half dozen to a dozen times probably, right? It's going to be something different every time, but it all centers around now, for me, how balanced they are with so many good players.
They are a really balanced team, like way more balanced. Not that I was expecting, because I knew they had a lot of talent, but just watching them out there, the flow that they have, like that looked like a team that's been playing for a while together, which they have been, obviously. And then how about the freshmen? I mean, you and I talked about it. We'll have an interview clip here in a minute. Delaney Knoll looked really good. She obviously had some freshman slip-ups, and I talked to Rod about that a little bit after the game, but just lets her play through it, lets her figure it out, build her confidence. And, I think he was the one who pointed out, you look at Maya, where she was her freshman year to where she is now. I guess it's just part of the process. And he does such a good job and has done a good job of just letting these kids kind of figure it out on their own. You just let them in there, let them make mistakes, let them screw up, let them learn, and don't shatter their confidence. So that was good to see how she responded to that. She had a really good game. You mentioned the second half, and that's kind of where I think the positives come in from Pike, because like you mentioned, there were a lot of missed layups early on, but started to hit them a little bit better in the second half. And what's interesting talking to Pike is that after you come back from, 20 down in the fourth quarter to beat Avon in overtime, it gives you kind of a different level of confidence when you get in those situations. It's obviously not ideal, but when it does happen, you know that you can come back in it. And I mean, they finished the game overall with 25 turnovers, which is more than honestly I thought there were. So that Pike defense is going to cause some problems for teams over the course of the season. They shot the ball a little bit better in the second half, 35% as opposed to 1.143, So that's a bit of an uptick. Still not where you want it to be, but it's better. And then on, the other side, they limited Homestead to 1 of 9 from 3 in the first half. So some little positives to pull away from Pike. They're a team that I think I tweeted this, but I'll be excited to see where they are come the Marion County tournament in a few weeks compared to where they were yesterday when we saw them for the first time.
Yeah, time will tell if this is going to be true or not, but Pike's going to be fine. This has to be an outlier. I mean, there was a time where I actually, watched Coach Barlow, as Keith's assistant, say something to Keith when they were probably missing their 10th free throw of the first half. And I said to the people that I was watching the game with, I was like, Keith's receiving the news right now that they're 1 for 10 from the free throw line. They couldn't have been much better on layups either. I mean, they were probably 2 for 20 from the free throw line and layups. And those are the 2 looks that you want in basketball. They're the 2 highest percentage points per possession, advanced analytical looks that you could possibly get. But Divine was getting downhill. They were getting looks. I love the Jeffers kid, by the way. I think she had like 13 points, 14 rebounds, maybe vice versa. Yep. But that kid's a menace. Booker's really good. The other thing is they don't have Sanaya Smith. I mean, they don't have one of the best point guards, not just in the county, not just in the Indianapolis area, but anywhere in that class. Sanaya Smith is one of the best point guards. She returns in a couple of weeks. So Pike, I think, is going to be fine. If you just saw the score, I think it looked relatively respectable on the scoreboard, and Hank had pointed it out. It's because they had a nice second half run, started making some of those layups, but continued to get to the free throw line to kind of milk that game away. Is it a different game if they make some of those layups early? I don't know. Homestead's really talented, but Pike can very easily draw that conclusion. So I think they'll be fine. Doubling back to the point that you used to transition back into that, and you talked about the youth with Homestead and Delaney Knoll and Parker. You're right. One of the things that draws my interest early in the season is to see the effect that these incoming freshmen have, because this is their first level of high school basketball. You start to lay a foundation for what the narrative will be for certain teams. I mean, you don't know what you can expect. Coach Parker did allow Delaney Knoll to play through some freshman mistakes, and it paid early dividends. I think in the first half, I think she made what could only be categorized as a freshman mistake, and then makes a play. The very next possession, gets a defensive rebound, pushes the ball up the floor, and hits a slashing Carly Mullering across the paint, and she gets a left-handed layup. And so those things, I think, are really important to build confidence over time for a team like that. But these kids, like Parker, this isn't the first time he's done it. Like this, the cool thing about the big school like Homestead is it has a very small town feel. We'll get into this, at least it does down here, okay? We'll get into this when we talk to Hollie. But many of these kids that are on that roster were born on the Homestead varsity basketball team. Like they were born and bred to play this role, whether it's Carissa McLaughlin and her sister Kendall, who's on the roster now, whether it is kids like Ankenbrook and Helsum and Mullering and stuff like that. Delaney Knoll is no exception. So we've known that this day is coming, and it's nice to see it, and it's nice to see that they're not rushing that process and allowing her to develop through the natural course of evolution.
I'm going to go ahead and play a video clip from yesterday, a couple of clips. You can find the full interview on IndyStar.com. This is Whitney Ankenbrook, the aforementioned Knoll, and the aforementioned Maya Epps, following last night's game, just on the improvements from last summer and just how, for Delaney, how she's been fitting in and settling into varsity as a freshman. Curious, I saw you guys over the summer back in like June and now today. What have you been most impressed with in terms of your team's growth and improvement since then?
Movement, spacing, and I think just the maturity level has gone up a lot. Even just since the summer, I feel like everybody's kind of leadership and everyone knowing their roles too.
And defensive transitions, we've been working on that a lot. So I think everyone's doing their part.
Delaney, what have you thought of your first little taste of varsity basketball?
I love it. It's definitely harder than last year. But I love my teammates. Everyone on the team's great.
We love her. Yeah.
Yeah, what have you guys been seeing from her?
Just a lot of hard work, especially in practice. Like ever since open gyms and everything, even before open gyms, like we knew she was gonna come in and work really hard, and I think that's why she's kind of gravitated toward us so much.
She's handling the pressure well. Very intelligent. Knows what to do.
I love freshman candor because I asked her later if the game was starting to slow down for a little bit, and she just kind of laughed and said, "Not really, no." So you got to love that. But again, a nice win for Homestead over Pike, 65-46. Homestead moves on now. They play Norwell Concordia, and then they're back down here on Saturday at Noblesville. Pike, meanwhile, they're 2-1. They'll look to bounce back against at an event it looks like at Warren Central, and they have Westfield coming up on the 26th. That's what we got.
To put a bow on Homestead too. I mean, let's give Maya some sound here. They're late at the end of one of the quarters. They were holding for the last shot. There was like 36 seconds left, which is greater than the duration of a shot clock that you would play in college or AAU or something like that. And they were running continuity man. Maya comes back and gets the ball with, 8 seconds left or something like that. Takes a high ball screen, drives the lane, gets 2 free throws and gets 2 points, and they score the last basket of the half. Okay. So let's just unpack that for a second. I mean, the fact that she's getting rid of the basketball, knowing that she's going to get it back, she has the wherewithal to understand when she has to have it back, have all of the team around her spaced out, get the look that she wants in a ball screen, and then have the talent and the athleticism and the ability to go downhill, make a play, get to the free throw line. Okay. In 36 seconds, you can see that all of those things that they talked about, leadership, spacing, talent, it shows in one play. And again, just the comment that I make, not every basketball team can do that. And they did it on the road at Pike 3 games into the season. This is a really, really good basketball team. And if they can put it together, like some of that stuff that I said that Parker was probably mad about, like the end of the stuff, this is an absolute wagon. And not breaking news, but they're going to be somebody to be dealt with.
Absolutely. Another team that made some waves this week as I transitioned seamlessly here was South Knox over the weekend. We're going to go ahead and bring in their coach, Hollie Eaves. Hollie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. Big start to the season for you guys. I think the ones that are going to catch everybody's attention, obviously, are the 2 wins over 3A Washington, and then you guys went out and won the Corden tournament yesterday. So I'll start big and broad and just generally, what have you seen from your group of girls here over the first couple weeks?
As a coach, you're never really satisfied, but they leadership, especially from our young sophomore, Kendall Hill, and Ella Bobe. She's a senior for us, and she does a really good job of just kind of calming everybody down and knowing where everybody needs to be. But to beat Washington at 2 times in 1 week, it is really great. They came locked in both games. We didn't have a great run at the start of the tournament. I don't know if it was legs or staying at a hotel or what, but I think that they knew they had to be ready to play against Washington because they're aggressive. They're a really good basketball team, and Gretchen always has them ready to play.
Danny, you had a chance to watch that Washington game. I'll let you two talk about that a little bit, break it down.
Yeah, I mean, how's it going? Good morning, by the way, Hollie.
Good morning.
Congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I was at the first time you beat Washington on the road in a really big environment. The second time I really just saw the score. I don't think there was a live stream, so I wasn't able to see it. In the first basketball game, I think you got a triple-double from Kendall Hill, right? 18, 15, and 10 or something like that. The 10 being assists, which is really, really hard to do. And then the second basketball game, I just kind of saw a box score, and I think Bren Hill, and that's Kendall's older sister, right?
Right.
Hangs 27.
Yep.
Yeah, so how do you assess how you go into those are 2 different headlines as to how you beat the same basketball team. Seems like you can win a lot of different ways. I walked out of that first game, Hollie, saying you have a lot of kids that do a lot of things really well, and there seems to be connected. What say you? How do you assess the difference in how you can win basketball games? Do you guys have an identity What is that identity if you have it? Just talk a little bit about that and familiarize our audience with South
So
Knox.
we have a lot of our sophomore group is really big. They've been playing together since they were in the second grade, and they've just refused to lose their whole entire time growing up. I think they were beat maybe twice, and against like huge schools, but they come out and they fight. So like the identity of our team, we're gonna choose who's gonna beat you that night. Like if you're gonna leave somebody open, like Grace Detweiler, she had 5 threes against our first time playing Washington. And then, we have Ella Bobe. She can go off any night. There's almost not enough scoring to go around sometimes. And that's why we're really just focused on defense. Just so we can get more possessions out of the game, trying to get more steals, getting up on people. It's been a really focus for us. I've been trying to make them prideful in their defensive average, and making sure that stays pretty low. And I think they're buying into it a little bit more than they did last year. So I think that's a great start. And I want to always start on the defensive end.
On defense, what are you looking to do? Are you looking to speed teams up? Do you want to force them and choke them out in the half court? How do you like to approach it?
It really just depends. We play a lot of different defenses. Probably our best is man-to-man. They get to help side really well. If we have a different change against the Reed kid, we had to switch it up a little bit last night. The first night, Ella Bobe stepped up, stopped her, did a really good job. I knew Gretchen was kind of going to be ready for that, and go high-low on us. They really killed us in the fourth quarter against them of just going high and low, and then we wouldn't get around quick enough. So we kind of face guard her, Katie Reed, for the second and third quarter. Even in the post, we just had the help side take it away. So, and Madison Parrish, awesome on defense. She did a great job just sticking her nose in there. And Katie's a nice, strong girl. So it was a big task.
So Ella, so what you're talking about, Hollie, Ella guarded her when you played at Washington in the first matchup. And I thought she did a really good job not giving up rebounding position, staying behind her. But if you want to play behind a kid as talented as Katie Reed, you got to push her out on the floor. Yep. So you're saying that she was able to pin you a little bit deeper. They were getting some of that high-low action. Did you keep Ella on her for the second night, or it sounds like you switched off to Parrish then? So
she started on her the first quarter. We actually started in a zone. We started in a drop zone the first quarter. And then we went to man about 2 minutes in, and then we switched Parrish to her. Took her away. Her and Ellie Burke did a really good job of just being in her face, being physical with her. Not so much pushing her out of the floor, maybe pushing her behind the basket a little bit more. We noticed when she gets in there, she gets a little stuck, especially if she doesn't have an area to move. So we really wanted just to make things tight where she held the basketball.
You mentioned Ella Bobe's name's come up, and I've been looking forward to talking about it. She signed the other day as the first D1 basketball commit from your program in 36 years. I guess just what is she like as a kid, and what has it meant for you to have the opportunity to coach her?
Oh, I can't say enough about how great of a kid she is. We've been through highs and lows together, and she's literally like family to us. My kids call her Aunt Ella. I mean, they love her. She works for me in the summer. Just an awesome kid, but even better, it's an awesome family. Basketball's in their blood. Brother played at UE. So, they get it. They understand it. They're one of those parents that will let you be hard on their kid. I can ride her, but now we're to the point in our relationship, like we can sit and talk. We can, what are you seeing out there? And she does a really good job of giving that feedback, but also good at communicating with her teammates. That's not so much. Kendall's more of a you do it now kind of kid, and Ella's more like, let's talk about it. What are you seeing? That's kind of leader she is.
So Ella, you mentioned her working for you during the summer. What does she do for you?
So I own 3 daycares, and she helps run the daycares. She's around all the kids all day long. I think it's been really good for some of my girls to be around kids quite a bit. but she does a great job. Anything you ask her to do, she's going to do it for you. So, I mean, just great kid.
So I'm guessing that have you known her since she was a little kid growing up, like a toddler and all that?
No, I actually, my first time coaching her, I think she was in the 3rd grade.
Oh my God.
So yeah, I was very impressed with her skills. She was so small. Like if you look at her freshman pictures to now, you're like, oh my God, how'd that kid survive? Tiny. We worked on gaining weight. Her first freshman year, I mean, we had her eating everything. She was like, I'm so sick of eating. I don't want to eat anymore. I'm like, you got to eat, kid. I mean, me and her mom were forcing food down her all the time just to help her gain weight.
I have this vision of Ella Bobe doing like ball handling drills at all of Hollie's daycares. I mean, we talked about it. You were probably, I don't know if we call it backstage or whatever. Before Hank had put you on, you were probably listening to some of the comments. I mean, these kids, it's not a transient community, right? There's not a lot of people coming in and out. So when I say that somebody is born in a Knox County varsity basketball jersey, I mean, that happens. So I make a joke about Ella doing ball handling drills, but this is something that you guys have known was going to happen for a very long time. You had known when these kids got to the varsity level that there was going to be a chance to win a state championship and maybe even a couple of times over. Is that an accurate assessment of what it's like down there at South Knox and North Knox?
Yeah, I definitely have to say that. Honestly, it's never happened at South Knox before. They've never even won a regional before. So to keep these kids together is a big deal. So we have a couple schools. We have South Knox, there's North Knox, Vincent's, and then Reveille is a private school. Before I started at South Knox, we had a lot of kids decide to move to Reveille. You would coach them up to 8th grade and then they would move on. So it was one of those things like, we got to turn it around. We got to get kids to stay. And this is really the first group that we've kept together from 3rd grade on. They've been playing together. None of them, I think, has had a chance to even want to move. So, I mean, they've best friends. I mean, last night they all, we stayed in a room, and instead of staying in all 3 rooms, they all slept in the same room for like 3 hours. It smelled terrible, but they're just very, very close. And like, they play AAU together. They're constantly around each other and they always have a basketball.
Yeah.
So how do you go about changing the culture and making it so that kids want to stay and want to play basketball and represent South Knox? It sounds on the surface like a pretty intimidating task to take on.
It was very challenging. My first couple of years, it was a lot of culture battle, just not to accept, it's okay to be winning maybe 6 games a year, that you don't want to lose, that losing isn't fun, and that winning is fun. That was what the biggest thing I think I struggled with, and still kind of struggle with it with some administration. My girls want to be in the gym at 5:30 in the morning and get their shots up. I have a good 8 of them that get 300 shots up a day, just to make sure they're ready to go if we don't have time during practice. So it's still a bit of a struggle, but nothing like it was at the beginning, just to understand the hard work that goes into building that program. And if you have high expectations, you got to work for it.
Yeah. Reveille you mentioned that, maybe there was some talent, maybe from the county. I remember they had a run, Hank, before you started covering it for the Star, where they seemed like a perennial member of the state championship weekend. I mean, I remember a kid by the name of Grace Wagner who ended up walking on at IU and finishing her career there. But I think sometimes it's, you learn that sometimes the market around you also helps. One of the more fascinating stories, Hollie, is not just South Knox and its excellence, but also at the same time North Knox. And so now we have this rivalry that last year I really started to kind of, I don't know, for lack of a better description, immerse myself in, just educate myself on. Like, I want to go to that game this year. Like, I'm going to need. but I don't like Hollie. First of all, I don't want to get there at 3:00 and park 100,000. Like I'm going to need a nice little section or whatever. It can be in the corner, but I'd like to be able to roll in at a normal time. But can you just talk about that rivalry and what it's meant to your kids? I mean, I in talking to some of your kids, like it seems like that's the measure, at least previously, the measure to the success of a season is how you do in that. And I can't imagine that environment. So I don't know, what do we need to know about the South Knox, North Knox rivalry from your perspective?
It's intense. You know, and it's intense with the girls too. I think that pressure key that we didn't have that, stepping our schedule up this year, I think is going to help, but we didn't play in games like that. We didn't have, close games where you had to perform or you lose something. So I think that's the difference that we're going to have this year is just we're playing in those more intense games that, you know, you do have to perform. You do have to do all the little things. I think a lot of time last year we just got by on our athleticism. But I'm putting us hopefully in situations that we do have to perform better. The North Knox and South Knox game is crazy. Sold out both places. We played at South Knox first. Every time we play North Knox, it's not just for a game. It's either blue chip or sectional. So there's something to lose every single time we play. I was telling the paper when we first started, we haven't won a blue chip since 1988. And I told them that's when I was born. So, you know, we need to do something about that. But we have, North Knox is in our blue chip. Then you had Reveille when they were going state to state, like back to back to back. So it was always just, you got to overcome that. You got to come over that. You always come in second. I told them I'm done being their little sister. So we need to make up our mind this year and get it done.
For the uninitiated, what is the blue chip? Is it an actual trophy?
Oh, it's our conference. So our blue chip conference is usually pretty tough. It's down a little bit this year, but I think it's going to get right back up with the kids that are coming in. But like I said, there was always Reveille, North Knox. Lagodi was in it when they were really good, winning that state title. So it was just always someone always went on a state run.
So you've already played Washington. Then you enter this Cordon Central tournament where, I mean, it has Borden in there, which is one of the best Class A teams. I think it had Washington. It had, oh my gosh, who else was in that event?
New Albany.
New Albany or whatever. So there's obviously there was a point to really beef up your schedule and to be a little bit more battle tested when it came to the tournament outside of just the rivalry with North Knox. What's next? I mean, do you have somebody that's new on the schedule that you're really looking forward to? And I can't imagine that there's a ton of teams on your schedule that are giving you a run, right?
Right. So, well, it depends who shows up. Like I said, in the beginning of the tournament, we did not play very well. But we had a little, meeting, come on, let's go kind of thing. And, we came out ready to play against Washington, but we're in the Hall of Fame Classic this year. What's really going to challenge us, the top 3 teams in the state of Indiana are in there. So I'm looking forward to it. I want to see what my kids are made of. I think the kids are up for the challenge. We haven't really emphasized it very much yet, but they know what they're up for.
That's an impressive little stretch, too, for you guys. You go from 4A Castle, then you got HSE to start the tournament, then either Lawrence Central or Homestead, and then you go to Evansville Memorial right after that. I mean, you stacked it up perfectly there right around Christmas time.
Yeah, I really tried. Like I said, I don't think we were battle tested last year very, very much, and that's my fault completely. So I wanted to make sure that I covered that basis and make sure that, we're not leaving any cards unturned this year.
I'm always fascinated in talking scheduling with coaches. Were you intentional about when you built those games around the Hall of Fame Classic? Like, were you trying to get it when there's no school to worry about and you can just practice?
So the biggest thing was getting in the Hall of Fame Classic, just kind of waiting and you're in like the top 7 and trying to like hold out on different tournaments and push people around. And so it was really waiting on that was the biggest thing. And then Evansville North's coach was great. He worked with me. I had to move his game 3 times, but he was awesome about it and helped us work things around. And
That's Tyler, right?
Yes, Tyler. Yeah,
he's a friend of the program.
Yeah, he helped me move games. I had to text him and call him, and I called him at like 5 o'clock in the morning because I'm usually up by 4. I'm like, I'm sorry I'd call you this early. I had to get things done, but it helped me move games. And he was so awesome about being like, hey, it's no big deal. I want you guys to be, and it would have been this tournament. We would have played this Saturday against Evansville North if he wouldn't have let us be in the Corden tournament. So he's great.
So was the Cluckers battle at the First Capitol? Was that a late ad?
Yes. We were about 3 games short. I was begging for games for a little bit, and just competitive. I'd rather practice if we're not gonna be competitive. So I was calling everybody. Northview's coach, Zach Keys, helped me out. He was like, they would love for you to have you, and just had to move things around and reorganize the schedule again. But I'm really glad we could do it.
What is it like scheduling? You mentioned being a few games short coming into the season. Like what, I don't want to say cause it because it seems like a negative, but what leads to that? What makes scheduling difficult?
Well, we had a lot of teams drop us after last year. And either way, if they didn't drop us, we probably would have too, because I knew our schedule strength needed to go up. So, that was the biggest thing. Regardless if 2 years from now, I regret that, but I think that's something that had to happen. And these kids are used to competing against some of those kids. And we had to get them out there and make sure that they were getting the best possible challenge.
Hollie, I'll get you out of here on this one. I'm curious, what are your thoughts and I guess just feelings? Have you ever gotten to experience the Hall of Fame Classic before? Or will this be a first for you?
No, this is my first of even actually going. So I'm excited. I went to the Hall of Fame when we had our big meeting, and it was so cool. I can't wait to show the girls. We're going to go down the night before and practice and then show them around the Hall of Fame. And they're going to eat it up. They're going to absolutely love it. So we're excited. I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I think my kids are going to perform well. So
your community will travel for that too, right?
Absolutely.
You guys will probably. You're kind of the small school representation, but you might have the greatest number of fans that are there.
Absolutely, I've heard that a couple of times too, as well.
That's awesome.
Our fans travel with us very, very well. Even over the summer, we travel to Purdue to play in Purdue camp, and I always tell Katie, I'm like, be ready for our fans. We at least have 20 to 30 during the summer follow us around. And she's just like, what do they do all? Like, what do they do between games? Where are they coming from? And I'm like, they love to watch it. And I have great parents too. They're very supportive. They help me out. Especially when I have 2 kids of my own. So they help me with them. If I have to take them, they're more than welcome to help me, and they do a good job.
That's fantastic. Well, Hollie, thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys here in a couple weeks at that Hall of Fame Classic.
Awesome.
And best of luck to you guys. Thanks again.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Congrats on the start. See you, Hollie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Hollie. I was Hollie Eaves, coach at South Knox High School.
So Hank, before we move on, I just kind of wanted to point out, and I want to talk about Hollie first. So that was my first live opportunity when I went to the Washington game to see him. And there's several things that I could point out to really talk about South Knox. Ella Bobe, big time shot making. She talked about how excellent she is. She just signed to play college basketball. Bren Hill too, the triple double by Kendall Hill. But she mentioned in just a fleeting sentence, Grace Detweiler hitting 5 threes with 67 seconds left. I think it was a 16-point basketball game. And this is one of the top 3 teams in 3A, on the road. Okay. And there were a lot of people there. Grace Detweiler at that point with 67 seconds left the basket looked really big for her. And she has an opportunity on the wing, catches the ball with nobody around her, and has an opportunity for her 6th three. Okay. Now, anybody that's human would have just launched that thing. And she didn't. She passed up the shot. Hollie probably told him at some point in time, let's milk the clock or we're only going to take layups. And 20 seconds later, sure as heck, they get a layup. And that was the one possession that I was like, this is a really well-coached basketball team with a lot of really good pieces. And I think one of the articles called Grace Detweiler's, 18 in that game, or excuse me, 15 in that game, a career high. So I know that she hasn't had 6 threes in a game, and she put aside the personal accolade for something that was better for the team. And South Knox has a very good chance to come up I-69 twice, not just for the Hall of Fame, but again for the state championship. And then I'll close with this. I mean, I think the mathematical thing, the transitive property, right? Like if A is greater than B and B is greater than C, then A is greater than C. There is one common opponent with North Knox and South Knox right now. And the transitive property doesn't apply in sports. We can't automatically say that South Knox is better than North Knox because of the one common opponent. But if the transitive property does relate in this instance, Washington beat North Knox by 20 and South Knox beat Washington twice by double digits. So I think it'll be very interesting. South Knox probably, and Hollie probably hate me right now for probably pointing that out, because I'm sure North Knox will circle it, and that's a game that probably doesn't matter what the records are, I would assume. Mm-hmm. But South Knox is going to be a story all year, so start paying attention, everybody.
If anybody from North Knox is listening, just let me know and I can clip it off for you. I'll save you
some.
Hey,
we had Lexi on. The first perspective that we had was Lexi Primus.
That's true. She was one of the first player guests we had on the show, actually.
Absolute stud. Going to Lipscomb and absolute stud.
That's going to be a fun game there. December 7th at North Knox, South Knox at North Knox. And like we mentioned, if you want a chance to see South Knox a little closer to home, there's the Hall of Fame Classic. They open against Hamilton Southeastern in the second game following Homestead versus Lawrence Central. Danny, another game that we covered last night. There's a couple games that we covered. I'll give us a chance to breathe. I'm going to play some highlights from Eastern Hancock versus Triton Central. And then I'm going to hit us with an interview clip with Addie Baxter from last night following the Fishers Columbia City game, and you and I can vamp from there. All right, so to set that up, Triton Central last night falls to Eastern Hancock by the final score of 60-53. Mackenzie Cook, who you saw quite a few highlights of there, including a nifty little spinning and 17 points, 12 for Bella Sotelo, the sophomore, 10 for Kirsten Judd, the junior. Eastern Hancock, a takeaway that I had from that, Danny, they're a bit deeper, a little bit more balanced maybe than kind of expected them to be at this point of the season, but they're getting some good contributions. That felt like kind of their first big test of the season. You get a rivalry game in there, fourth game of the year, following a series of blowouts. So I was interested to see how they'd respond. Same thing with Triton Central, who has Mary Rose Felling, who's a really talented player. But yeah, they got, like I said, Cook, Sotelo, and Judd all had big games. I was texting with Clark, who provided those highlights about it, and he said Judd was really impressive. Sotelo, too, had herself a nice game. So good win for Eastern Hancock.
Yeah, Eastern, and I don't, again, very similar to what we talked about with Hollie, they'll only be tested through their schedule at certain times, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just not this gauntlet of players. So this was really one of the first big tests that Eastern Hancock would have. You mentioned the rivalry game, which is a great equalizer, but there's also familiarity with all of the pieces. I know Kenzie was getting face guarded all the way to come up with 17 against a full face guard without seeing the basketball game or being there. I just know through my experience is probably a difficult thing to do. When she doesn't have that, I mean, going out and getting 30 is light work for Kenzie. Okay. But she has to have help. And I think the one thing that I would say is Eastern Hancock is different this year. And I think they're a little bit more athletic, and I think they're faster this year. Okay. Mm-hmm. So Sammy Bolding and all of those kids, yes, they're extremely athletic, but you mentioned Bella Sotelo. This kid, I think if my memory serves me correct, is like an incredible track athlete. And this is not hyperbole here. Like, I think she has one of the 3 fastest times in an event, whether it's the 400 or 200, whatever her event is. I think she has like the 3rd fastest time in the state. So these kids can fly. And so now Kenzie gets to play fast. She gets to play in the open floor. She has people in front of her. And that's going to be when you're fully face guarded the way that Felling was and Cook was in this basketball game. The easiest way to get going is in transition. Transition doesn't work unless you have people ahead of you. And Bella Sotelo, I can tell you, there's probably no one in the state that plays any sport that Bella Sotelo can't get in front of. So as we continue to watch Eastern Hancock, I'll reserve a lot of my big opinions of the scheme that they're running and things like that until I see them live. But just on the surface, they're different. They're very different this year, and they'll be a fun watch. But they're 4-0 now? 3-0, 4-0?
4-0, yeah. With
Kenzie's killing it.
Wins. But yeah, 4-0 is 4-0,
Yep.
At this point in the season, especially for those schools. Next big test, it looks like, just on paper, glancing at it, they travel to Cathedral on December 14th. I remember that game coming down to the wire last year, and then they post Lapel. Lapel will be an interesting team. I'm excited to dig into them. We'll save that for a chance when we have a little more evidence on them. They play Hamilton Heights this week, a team that's in a bit of a rebuild with Trimpe in her first year, but it has a bright future there. Another game, Danny, that we covered last night that I wanted to at least mention was Fishers holds off Columbia City 57-53. Nevaeh Dickman was really good early, 18 points for her. Riley Shellhammer also had 18 points, and then 12 for Allison Shoy, who came up big late. On Columbia City's side, Addie Baxter, 26 points. She had 9 in the fourth quarter, ran into some foul trouble in the second quarter. Kind of felt like a tipping point in that game, but a good job. Tora Holler stepped up. She had 11 points in the game, and then, Leah Hurdle had 7 points. She did all of her damage in the second quarter. Here's a quick little interview clip again as I try to catch my breath.
Struggled up until 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, and so we got to be able to play the last 5 minutes the whole entire game, and so we really struggled on that regard, but I'm proud of the way that we came back and worked hard.
And I think rebounding was a big thing we need to get better at.
Who've been some of the younger kids you guys have seen step up this year?
Izzy Knitter, she's a freshman. Claudia Stratch. We have some upperclassmen who are inexperienced but are very knowledgeable and very smart. And so we have some new new pieces to our group. And so not only are we're not necessarily too young, we're just inexperienced, but we have a lot of really hardworking girls. And so I think it will take us pretty far this year.
So there you go. That was Columbia City following their loss to Fishers. I'm going to see Fishers again here in a couple weeks. So we're going to save the video interviews for then. But Fishers has some size this year. Like, unlike a lot of other teams in Sectional 8, they've got some quality posts there. They did some things really well. They had some things to clean up. It was a rough morning for them against Fort Wayne Carroll. Nice little bounce back, rough game the week before, a game that you saw against Center Grove. But also Center Grove is also just a really, really good team. So I think that that's part of it. But a lot of potential, and no reason. I was talking to people last night. No reason really for me to back off my assessment that they're probably top 2-3 in that sectional.
Yeah, so Fishers at the very beginning of the weeks has 18 points at the end of the third quarter and 22 points at the end of the game when they hosted Center Grove. I think it was on a Saturday, I want to say. So, a week ago yesterday. And before anybody really wants to jump to conclusion on that, I think that defensive or offensive or lack thereof output by Fishers says more about Center Grove than it does about Fishers. Okay, so let's establish that first. Okay, Center Grove is the best man pack line basketball team in the state. Okay, and they have been for a very long time. They switch everything. They have multiple pieces. They're very smart. They have leadership, and they don't miss assignments. Okay, so having said that, let's just take that game and remove it from the sample. Okay, they're still playing around with some things. You mentioned their size. I really liked what the Thomas kid gave last night. Dickman, of course, has some size, but there was another little nuance. I think that Lauren is really playing with who needs to be where for them to be most effective, and I think they want some scoring, for example, out of their freshman Shellhammer, right? And so I in the game last night when I was there, Choi was actually playing point. Which did a couple of things. If Addie in odd front zone then wanted to pick up the ball, now she's picking up Choi. They're close and they know each other, and so Choi wasn't going to back down from Baxter at all. But it allowed Shellhammer to really kind of pick her spots in quarter court and half court to be able to get shot volume and quality volume without having to run the offense or the basketball team. I don't know if that's a full-time change, or if they're just trying to get Riley going. And it worked because she had 18 points. But they do have size. Now, when you play Choi at point guard, that's a sturdy frame with a ton of experience and a lot of strength. And then you add Dickman and Thomas and now the outside and Anthony and those kids, and now the outside threat that Shellhammer and Burleson, another freshman coming off the bench, can provide later in the year. I think they are going to trend upwards, but right now I don't think the trajectory is as steep as they want it to be because, and I didn't talk to Lauren, but I know her well, and I would say I think she's still trying to figure some things out too.
Mm-hmm. They're an interesting team. We had Danny some other games to touch on here too as we try to keep
real quick on Columbia City because I wanted to point something out that Addie said, which is really smart. There were a couple of possessions late in that basketball game where I thought Columbia City actually brought help defenders into the middle of the paint when Addie was trying to take the basketball game over. She picks up her second foul, sits the lion's share of the second quarter, comes back in the third quarter, has a hard time gaining rhythm, and then when they were going on the run in the fourth quarter, Addie was just taking it over. She got some timely shooting from some of her teammates. But there were some spacing issues going on, and it's not because it doesn't have to do anything with coaching, doesn't have anything to do with Addie. I think there is some continuity that's not there yet. And so I think they're going to continue to get better. Addie's go-to move is she likes that spin move. And then it's almost like getting a post defender on there. She can take the fadeaway. She can take the extended layup. She has that little rocker step where she comes back to you and kind of an up and under on the same side. But some of those kids, when Addie would attack the middle of the floor, would congest the middle of the floor. So I think something to watch. I think they're going to be just fine. And that was a nice comeback. But I'm sure they're very frustrated in Columbia City because they're not used to losing a game like that. But anyway, sorry, I just wanted to vamp on that a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned it. They left some points out on the table late. That'll be what they tell you. There was some controversy late. I think Columbia City was trying to call for a timeout, but the refs, I guess, just didn't hear her. It didn't hear Coach Amy Shear as she was trying to call for the timeout. Addie ends up getting whistled for a travel, turn it over. Shoy comes down, hits a couple free throws, and it's ball game right there. So it was tighter, even tighter than it looked with the final score, with how things played out there late. But an impressive showing by them. Their schedule ramps up from here. They play Snyder next, and then I know they'll be down here for Sneakers for Santa in a couple weeks. They play Brownsburg, which will be a fascinating matchup where it's kind of like differing strengths where Columbia City obviously has the guard. Brownsburg has the post. We'll see what happens from there. Some really good buzzer beaters from last week. Let's mention at least Scottsburg. We have video here from Justin Soklin, friend of the show. This one is pretty great. They come back to win over B&L at the buzzer. Lola Fouts in overtime, 43-41, as I pull up the video here and hit play. That was pretty awesome. Scottsburg wins 43-41 in the final second of overtime. And then over at
was that on Damon Bailey Court? Did I see that right?
Yeah.
Oh, man, what a moment! What a moment for that kid. Very
unbelievable.
Cool.
And by the way, B&L has some banners to hang up. I was there for semi-state volleyball and was disappointed that Chloe's Miss Basketball banner hasn't been hung yet. So whoever's running the show over there, it might be Soak actually. Soak, you need to get on that, buddy. So if you could, that'd be great. This next team we want to pause on, we want to talk a little bit about Chatard. I think the best place to start, at least video-wise, this is from Indiana SRN, is how they won their game against Mount Vernon the other day.
This is wild.
4 seconds to go. Berzai drives, throws up a shot. It goes in.
No.
I don't.
Throws it off the top of the backboard and in for Olivia Berzai. The junior now does it again. She did something similar against Cathedral last year in the city championship game. She walks it off. Chatard improves to 2-1 at the time going into that Gibson Southern game, which they lost to dropping back down to 500. But Danny, I know you wanted to spend some time talking about Chatard, as do I, so I'll let you lead us off.
Yeah, this is a team that's going to figure into the end within their Class 3A. One of the better teams in Indianapolis in the class. And I had an opportunity to watch them twice now. I watched them against Noblesville. They hosted Noblesville and then went on the road against Mount Vernon. And then you saw the buzzer beater that Berzai had. Okay. I'd be remiss if I didn't start with Caskey. This kid can be dominant at times. I mean, there were times in those two basketball games where she was just downright a bully. And like against Noblesville, for example, Cece Quigley is a bona fide Division I athlete, like really, really good. One of the better players in the area. And Caskey has this ability to just create contact and go through the contact. I think Quigley picked up her third foul in the first half, picked up her fourth foul early in the third quarter. I mean, it doesn't stop Tipner and Noblesville in that game, but Caskey is, if she's going to get touches on the block, like they have a couple baseline out of bounds plays where some of it's really basic kind of screen to screen interaction. They have like a 3 across on the baseline side where Caskey will set the first one and then roll back to the strong side block. I mean, they got it twice. Okay. And against Noblesville, they got it twice. And my take home from that is if you get the ball deep below the block on Caskey's right hand, it's points. And so what a luxury to have, particularly within that class. Berzai's great. And yeah, that's a horse shot. Bank off the top of the backboard twice, fall in kind of thing. And it's a lucky shot or whatever. But Berzai's a downhill attacker. The kid that I want to point out, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to the other kids on the roster, but I couldn't keep my eyes off the production that Lily Braun had on the defensive side. Okay. This is a Norman Dale chewing gum kind of instance. I don't know if you get that reference, Hank, but
but I love it.
She was full face guard on Zoe Wood, who is one of the better freshmen in anywhere in the state. Full face guard. And then full face guard on Meredith Tipner when they're in man. This kid is tough. She's athletic. She's a kid that obviously coach is going to trust with the best offensive threat on the opposite basketball team. So every night she knows that she's getting the Zoe Woods and Meredith Tipners that are out there. Okay. So I think Lily Braun is kind of an unsung hero for that basketball team, but Dan does a really good job of mixing up defenses. They seem to do it. It's not something that he calls on feel. It seems like something. I could be wrong on this. I don't know Dan very well, but like it seems like they're, on a make we're this, on a miss we're this, on a made free throw we're this, on a missed free throw we're that. It's just extremely difficult stuff to coach too, but they mix you up. So they'll give you the 1-2 quarter court. They'll give you the 1-3-1 kind of full court. They'll give you the face guard, in which they'll generally take away your best offensive option with kids like Lily Braun. This team is complete. They're very well coached. They're battle tested. They had a good run last year, and I don't expect that to be any different this year.
I think with respect to the defense, I think I talked to Berzai and Kasky after that Noblesville game, and that was something that they talked about too. So you can find that on IndyStar.com. Chatard, you mentioned them being battle tested. They go out, they lose to Gibson Southern 61-43. That's just, sometimes a better team, a really good team gets you. That happens. It's a good experience for them. They're going to play Pendleton Heights next. They got a week off before that game, and then they host Greenfield Central. So there really isn't any let up on their schedule through this first leg of the season, and that's by design. Dan is very conscious about how he schedules his team. He likes to talk about, I mentioned on the show before, but that Scottsburg game where he gets them into a hostile environment in a place and get them in some adverse conditions to see how they respond. And then Noblesville was a new ad this year, and it kind of comes at a perfect time for both teams. Maybe a little bit later in the season would be nice, but it was interesting to see how Noblesville would respond to that. And then same thing with Chatard going against a big 4A school, and they acquitted themselves quite well. It wound up being a 56-45 finish, but it was closer than that through three quarters, as memory serves. Alex Kendall too, we should mention her. She's having a good season. 16 points in the opener. She's averaging around 11 points a game for them, the 6'1" forward/guard. So she's been good for them. On the Noblesville side, just touching on them real quick as I try to pull up a name here, but Tipner continues to do different things. It was interesting how they set their lineup with Quigley in foul trouble. They just rode with the guards, which I think Donna thought she was going to get some looks at this year. Maybe wasn't expecting it this early in the season for such an extended period of time, but they played really well. So she just kind of rolled with it and kept going, and it paid off for her. It's an interesting team. Maya Blower coming back, the freshman point guard. She held herself pretty well. She has some big shoes to fill, filling in for Reagan Wilson, but she brings kind of a similar energy, I think. A fun kid to watch play, ferocious defender, seems like a pretty high energy kid. So Noblesville, again, like a lot of other teams, where I'm looking forward to seeing them in a week or two to see how far they've progressed, because it seems like they're kind of just sort of starting to tap into that potential. And then obviously Tipner, it seems like everybody, Jayla Lampley, Maya McAlusky, Meredith Tipner, whoever you are considering in the Miss Basketball race, are putting up huge numbers.
They really are.
So it feels like this race is going to be just phenomenal, because nobody wants to lose it, and they're going to keep putting up numbers and carrying their teams because they have to some extent, but just because, it means a lot to them, and they're poised for huge years.
Yeah. Tipner just won Miss Soccer. Congratulations. And won a state championship, and now has immediately transitioned to basketball and is just putting up absolute huge numbers. But we didn't know what the pieces were going to be around him. Quigley does a really good job. It showed on the Chatard tape. It also showed a little bit on the Avon tape, but more so in the Chatard tape. Quigley has a really good understanding of where Meredith Tipner wants to be. This is kind of the same thing that I was talking about with Addie Baxter. When Meredith drives middle, Quigley vacates the lane. And a really good shot for her is this kind of inside out catch and release 15-footer. And she's money when she gets that shot. Tipner knows exactly where she's going to be. So there does seem to be a little bit more continuity than we expected there to be. You mentioned Blower. Just because you don't know who Maya Blower is doesn't mean that she's a good player. This is the kid that was going to be PG1, long before, when Reagan Wilson was still there. Just because Reagan was there, you might not have known who she was, but this kid is, and again, I'm not, friends with the family or whatever. I, of course, know them and all of that. But this is a kid who's been training her entire life with Ashlyn Shade. This kid has been developing for this moment, and now she has it. And she's going to be much better than she is now. She's going to be much better next month. And then at the end of the season, and then just as Donna Buckley and Noblesville always do, she's going to be a major piece to deal with come sectional time. But I think the Miss Soccer thing that Meredith had, and the numbers that she's putting up, and the wins that she will accumulate, is going to be a story as the season goes on.
The kids' state tournament numbers, you can't argue with them. Between the two sports, I don't know, it'd be hard pressed probably to find anybody who's much better than her. One game that I wanted to touch on, Lanesville yesterday, they go down and they beat Castle on a neutral floor, 52-41. In the process, Hadley Crozier, who's back and playing, I think she scored 11 in her first game. She cleared 1,000 career points, so congratulations to Hadley. Purdue Poly in their win over Crispus Attucks, had a girl go for a triple-double. Tasia Briscoe, 23 points, 13 rebounds, 10 blocks, Danny. 10 blocks.
That's unbelievable.
I think that might actually be her second of the season. Kid's only a sophomore, so that's a pretty wild stat right there. And yeah, there were other games. What other game did you want to touch on before we bounced?
Yeah, so through the same format of just kind of touching on games, Jennings County, Silver Creek.
Oh yeah.
Couple notes on that. Brooklyn Renn was awesome. I mean, guys, like if you haven't seen her or have an opinion, go watch them now. This kid had a stretch in the second quarter where she hit a three. Held the three in the air, which I mean, with her wingspan, the thing was like 9 feet in the air. I was like, oh my God. But she hit a three. She blocked a shot with like two hands too. They had like a ball screen fill up post. So the coaches will know on that where she caught the ball on the block, hit him with a spin move and a 1 foot fadeaway. Like this kid is in her bag right now and playing as good a basketball as I've really ever seen her play. But interestingly about that basketball game is there was a really cool cat and mouse kind of moment between Christy Sigler and Scott Shane, the coaches of Jennings County and Silver Creek, respectively. Molly Ernstis was being face guarded by Emma Shane, who did a marvelous job. Mm-hmm. And Emma is she's little. I don't know, 5'5", 5'6", something, 5'7", something along those lines. And Molly Ernstis had I think a bagel at the end of the first quarter. Really difficult shot attempts. I think 5 shot attempts. Doesn't find a way to put the ball in the basket, and they're not going to be super successful unless Molly finds a way to get the ball in the hole. She's extraordinarily talented on the offensive end. So Christy moves her into the post, and they start posting on Emma Shane. So Scott counters by putting Brooklyn Renn on Molly Ernstis. Christy counters back by saying, hey, let's bring Molly out. Now let's play point. Let's attack Brooklyn Renn off the bounce. So they started to attack Brooklyn Renn off the bounce. Scott realizes, he's like, well, now I have my best shot blocker away from the basket and help, and is creating all of these driving lanes. So then they put Emma Shane back on, but now they start trapping right away from different places on the floor. And then Jennings County gets 2 threes because Molly draws the double, spaces away, and assists 2 threes. And then they settle back on Emma Shane in full face guard. Okay. Mm-hmm. Like just a really cool kind of cat and mouse. If you watch that basketball game and know some of the individual pieces, Shane and Renn and Ernstis and these kids. I mean, these are big time basketball players in high school basketball players in Indiana. And many of them are going to be, a lot of those kids are going to be college basketball players too. But Silver Creek guys, like, Silver Creek is the real deal. And if Renn continues to play like this, they are going to be a huge problem for people.
30 points on 11 of 11 shooting I saw for Brooklyn Renn.
I didn't realize she didn't miss. That's what unbelievable.
Per the Twitters, it looks to be a decent source. So 30 on 11 of 11 shooting. That's crazy.
She was awesome. Awesome.
So obviously, Silver Creek is a bit of a hike for everybody, but they will be up in the Indianapolis area twice here before the end of the calendar year. They're going to be at Sneakers for Santa playing Gibson Southern, which is just going to be a phenomenal game. That's the 4:45 game on November 30th, so right after Thanksgiving. And then they're at the North Central at the Paul Logan Memorial Invite. They open up against Avon, and then they play Decatur Central on December 27th, 28th. I think that might be same as Hall of Fame Classic, one of those. But either way, opportunity to see them, Brooklyn Renn play. She's going to go high D1. Emma Shane, same thing, really talented player. Save the drive, catch them when they're in town, and be amazed.
And Ernstis did find a way, I think, to get to 20 in that game, maybe 19. I'm not sure what it was. I guess it matters if there was a specific goal to hold her under 20. But generally, the way coaches talk about that is with a kid like Ernstis, if you're going to guard him with full face guard and no help, you're going to be okay if she scores. You just want it to be 20 points on 20 shots. That's generally the number. If you say we can't stop this kid, but if she's going to get 20, we want it to be 20 shots. And I think Molly probably took 20 shots in that game. I think I maybe read that she was 6 or 7 of 20, maybe something like that. But now you're putting game plans in and hey, we're going to create this volume score to make her take, bad volume or things like that. But Molly, if once she gets better spacing with her kids around her, and Christy can understand, where everybody needs to be, that's going to continue to improve. That was a very difficult test for Jennings County early in the season, but it's going to be very good for them because they're going to be fine. Molly's really good.
Yeah. Wrapping things up here, Valparaiso lost to South Bend, Washington. They hung tough with them though, 77-70. Lily Barnes had a big game for the Vikings there. I think that about covers it. I'll have a story coming up later this week on, later this week, Monday. So you might be reading it as you listen to this, on Addison Davis, whose mom's been battling cancer. Her mom actually regained consciousness miraculously. Still has a really long road ahead and a big battle, but she was conscious at last check. So that's great for her. There's a GoFundMe page just to support the Davis family and honor Carrie because she does not have a will as it stands now. So there's nothing being left for Addison and her 2 older siblings. So anything you can give to help would be wonderful. And we'll have a story about her and just a kid that's overcome a lot of injuries, from a dislocated kneecap to a bone bruise to last year pitching through or playing through thoracic outlet syndrome, and where her arm would swell up to the point that they couldn't feel the pulse and she couldn't feel her hand. Played through and had some of her best games in the state tournament, which is unbelievable. I encourage everybody to check out that story. We'll have some player of the week stuff, some fall sport wrap-up stuff with awards and whatnot rolling out this week. So there's a lot coming from me. Danny, anything else that you wanted to touch on, mention, or anything like that before we get out?
No, I mean, there's a lot of people that saw or knew that I was at Attucks versus Carmel. We'll have an opportunity. I want a bigger sample size before I talk about Carmel. I think there's some interesting things to talk about there, but to get eyes, I will say this kind of on the way out. To get eyes on Cam Banks again was really kind of a cool thing. We mentioned it as one of the stories to kind of watch in the year, but no one's really seen Cam Banks play high school basketball in a long time. Because, going down to Florida and then coming back, and then the hire of her father, Cam, as the head coach at Attucks. She looks great. I think she looks great. I think she her frame has filled out. Her athleticism looks good. And no one has ever questioned the ground game with her. Like, attacking cones and chairs and defenders off the bounce has always been what she does really, really well. It's the air game that's always been in question. Can she shoot it well enough? Can she pass it well enough? Can she get the production when she does choose to pass it? And there were definitely signs that there is considerable growth in Cam Banks's game that would lead you to believe now that she's going to couple that great ground game with a good air game too. So let's keep our eye on Attucks. I think they're struggling from a team perspective in getting W's and things like that, but it doesn't mean that they're any less interesting because of Cam being there.
One other game to touch on before we bounce. Zionsville holds off Roncalli yesterday, 50-48. Looked like a really good game. Kenzie Chapman goes for 25, 6 assists, 7 rebounds, 4 steals.
Jeez.
So nice little stat line for her. Double-double for Caroline Sampson, 11 points, 10 rebounds, 6 steals for her. Haven't seen stats yet from Roncalli. But yeah, it was a tightly contested game. 2 teams that'll be interesting to see where they go. I think Zionsville could surprise some teams, and Roncalli's kind of teetering on that. We can really make some noise kind of status within their sectional. So
agreed.
A lot to get to. I think we're going to figure out a plan for this week. We might have another regular pod this week or next. We'll definitely have something before Sneakers for Santa, I think, because after all, Danny, we're coming up on our 1-year anniversary as a show. We should probably have Sable on to celebrate it. I enjoy these weekly shows. I think Danny enjoys doing them too. Let us know if you like listening to them, if this is something you'd like us to continue doing. Just give us a shout. My DMs are open, mentions are open, and obviously you can email me, or you can just call Danny directly. I'll leave his personal line on the in the show description.
Everybody has it.
I forgot, Mr. Popularity.
No. They'll get it. Yeah, they'll let me know why I'm not talking about this kid or that kid or whatever.
Perfect. Well, it's because we hate them. That's why. It's always the answer.
Please don't put that in the universe. Yeah, we do the best we can. I mean, there's a lot of games, and that's why I table the Carmel thing. I want to be able to spend some time and really kind of talk about the pieces, but watching them one time, I think is really unfair to maybe jump to the conclusions, even though we did so, I don't know, a half dozen times.
Even though we do it literally all the time. But yeah, I mean, we've both gotten out to some games, and it's easy to forget. We're only 2.5 weeks into the season at this point, 3 weeks into the season. So we barely even scratched the surface. We got Sneakers for Santa coming up. We got some massive holiday events, some big time games. South Bend, Washington, Lawrence Central's on Saturday. So there's plenty to get to. There's going to be plenty to dissect. We thank you all so much for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon. And recording.